This is the third webinar since the lockdown due to COVID and has attracted more participants than before. I think we've got about 350 to 400 right now. The Research Intelligence Unit was founded by Mr. Roshan Madawela and is registered in the UK with its offices in London. In 2003, the RIU established its regional office in Colombo. In 2015, the RIU commenced operations in the Maldives, Hong Kong in 2017, and this year we are entering Bangladesh. The RIU also has a presence in multiple locations in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Our investor forums cover many global cities. Over the years, the RIU has established itself as the premier research and consultancy firm for many top corporations and development institutions, both in Sri Lanka and across the globe. The RIU endeavors to promote sustainable practices to all clients. As a team, we value creativity, innovation, integrity, and we extend market intelligence and offer research-based consulting focused on key sectors of the economy. The RIU is the first consultancy company in real estate in Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Research and advisory services include market and financial feasibility, environmental and social impact studies, as well as marketing strategies and investment appraisal. The RIU has a strong track record of providing services to the world's top companies, corporations, including Fortune 500 companies. The RIU investor forums are held each quarter in the world's top cities, including London, Male, Colombo, Dubai, and Melbourne. The RIU is a member of the Arab-British Chamber of Commerce, British Sri Lanka Association, the International Chamber of Commerce, St. Albans Chamber of Commerce, and is on the judging panel of the Asian Property Awards, Property Group. I'm also extremely pleased to inform you that our newly revamped transactions division has just opened Colombo's first proper estate agents in the heart of Colombo 7 at number 24 Wijemanne Road, where you can get free professional advice on your investment and transactional requirements. Do get in touch with anyone on the team for more information. We are happy to announce that today's webinar has attracted a record number of attendees, over 400 from all parts of the globe. Our research team has emailed all of you a questionnaire on the property market. I would like you to ask you to please take a few minutes to subscription to our real estate market intelligence service that includes daily news alerts, weekly market updates, monthly economic reports, and more. This service is worth around $300. So please fill in the questionnaire and get a free subscription to stay informed and in the know. I would now like to request Dr. Anil D. Priyanka Baddevithana for the introduction and welcome address to this webinar. Anil is the Managing Director of the British Sri Lanka and Maldives Forum for Business and Trade and former head of the HDFC Maldives. He was also at the Housing Corporation in the UK for 8 years. Anil.
Thank you, William. Greetings from Colombo. On behalf of Roshan and the RIU team, of which I too am a member, I wish to extend a very warm welcome to all the resource persons, panelists, and the registrants who are participating at this share knowledge to gain knowledge and be part of the resilience and resurgence, which is what this webinar is all about. It was early in December last year when Roshan fixed the date for this webinar as 19th, which is today. We had no idea then that 2 days from now, that is on the 21st, the Colombo airport, the Mattala airport, will become fully operational, admitting returnees and tourists. Of course, they have proper checks and balances to address the concerns of the pandemic. So we are thrilled that this webinar comes at a crucial time and a turning point for Sri Lanka. And we are also happy to know that Roshan is not only an expert in research, but also a soothsayer who set the perfect timing for this webinar for Sri Lanka to begin its resurgence. Wearing my other hat as the Managing Director of the British Sri Lanka and the Maldives Forum for Business and Trade, which is our latest initiative to prepare leading institutions and individuals in partner countries to network across borders, on a platform sharing knowledge and opportunities in readiness for the world of post-COVID new reality. Therefore, I take this opportunity to invite you to visit our website to join and prosper. We are confident you will take away useful knowledge and insights from this webinar, and we wish all of you the best of luck with efforts for the resurgence in the new world and in the new reality. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now can I introduce you to Mr. Onila Wickramasinghe. Sorry. Yeah, Onila Wickramasinghe is the head of real estate research at the RIU. His presentation is on the real estate market research findings and analysis. Over to you, Onila.
Yeah, thank you, William. So before I go into my presentation, I would like to play a small clip.
RIU Annual Report, Key Highlights 2021. Residential apartments. Despite the pandemic, the affordable luxury apartment market remained resilient throughout 2020. The central bank low interest rate policy was a shot in the arm for developers as the lure of fixed deposits became less attractive to it. This, combined with developer discounts, resulted in an absorption rate of 55 to 60% for Tier 3 apartment projects in 2020, as compared to 70% in the previous year. Meanwhile, very high levels of inquiries were reported from the diaspora. When the airport reopens, we expect the inquiries to convert into a boost in sales in 2021. The apartment rental market did, however, feel the pinch as the lack of visiting diaspora and tourists triggered the low occupancy and a fall in rental yields to between 3 to 4% from 7% in 2019. Commercial office. In the high-end commercial market, we witnessed a trend for some large companies who were impacted by the pandemic to shuffle down from grade A to B+ developments. Consequently, developers continue to offer grace periods and concessions to their tenants to help them navigate the situation. Nevertheless, leasing rates held firm for the most part, reflecting the high demand and occupancy levels that have been enjoyed in this market segment. 2021 will see a gradual realignment of this market with a long-term growth projection. Retail. As a result of the abnormal events in 2020, the retail industry faced substantial shifts, and the amount of retail sales dropped to a new low due to lockdowns. Rental growth has suffered in the short term, but will recover towards second quarter of 2021. Bare lands. Apart from a small number of distressed sales, the land market held firm during 2020 as sellers refused to succumb to bargain hunters. Whilst it remains a buyer's market as compared to pre-April 2019, sellers too realize the long-term value of their assets. Consequently, the land market maintained value. For all the latest market insights, please refer to our annual report 2021. Be market intelligent with RIU.
Yeah. So I'll begin with my presentation. Hope you all could see the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some key highlights of our annual report, which we produce every year, the Sri Lankan Real Estate Market Report. So we'll first go into the economic performance. So the negative economic impact from the April 2019 East attack, Sri Lanka progressed towards a gradual recovery in the early 2020. But however, the occurrence of the COVID halted the progress. The economy experienced a downward pressure as the global economy as well as the country's main export markets. So according to ADB, Sri Lanka's GDP contracted by 5.5% in 2020 and expect to grow by 4.1% this year. So the forecast for the following year seems to be a lot more optimistic as industries bounce back. So inflation, Sri Lanka's 12-month consumer inflation edged up to 4.2% at the end of the year. So that's because food and non-food prices driven mostly by rise in transport costs. And Talking about the exchange rate, Sri Lanka has maintained a stable rupee and created conditions to bring back foreign investors to capital markets during 2020. However, as of today, we see the rupee has fluctuated during the past 2 weeks and has escalated to 192 rupees against the USD. Then the downward pressure has been a global trend. The low interest regime continued in the past 3 quarters and investors benefited with a drastic drop in interest rates. So the drop in interest rates, however, is a great opportunity to obtain long-term loans at a low interest rate. So individuals who depend on interest rate earnings looked out for alternative investment opportunities last year. So the share market was one of the first sectors to be hit back in March. However, from the data, we could see the Colombo Stock Exchange is particularly encouraged by the interest of local investors since restarting trading operations. And the number one source for luxury apartment sales are the local high net worth individuals and expats. So since the airports are being closed from the beginning of last year, we witnessed prospective overseas buyers, including investors and end users at advanced stages of negotiations, press the pause button. So overall, the country attracted nearly 500,000 arrivals in 2020 compared to 1.9 million arrivals in 2019. So however, a silver lining to be seen in 2021 as Sri Lanka tourism has prepared to resume tourism gradually in Q1 2021. So I'll first move into the luxury and semi-luxury apartment market in Sri Lanka. So in order to better understand the dynamics of the apartment market in Colombo, we developed a classification of the market into 3 tiers. So we considered several factors that include the price, location, size, and the branding of the development, as well as the features that are available. So the luxury apartment market can be categorized into upper mid, and mid-grade. In other words, tier 1, 2, and 3. So, so we have segregated prime and non-prime residential locations according to specific areas. So we could see Colombo prime locations such as Colombo 1, 2, 3, and 7 fetches the highest prices in Colombo. And in 2020, luxury and semi-luxury prices remained unchanged. However, tier 3 prices have reduced by around 10 to 15%. So according to research in 2020, Q3 and Q4, the interest in property among buyers grew. So we noticed a rise in expats looking to buy properties in Sri Lanka as their second home. So investors looked for bargains during this time. In the tier 3 market, we saw developers and sellers offer discounts up to 15%. So reduction of housing loans by some banks to below 10% had a positive effect on the affordable and the mid-range property market. So new apartment supply didn't add up to the inventory last year. However, with the existing supply, tier 1 apartments had a slow progress in 2020. We saw an escalation in sales for tier 2 and tier 3 apartments in the last 2 quarters. So sales velocities of apartments have faltered in the short term. And we know Sri Lanka has maintained its reputation for having one of the highest rental yields in the region over the past few years. So there are instances it went up to 9%. So last year, the rental yields were between 3 to 4% due to COVID. And because the rental market in Colombo by the expected are crashed, so especially the luxury apartment market, because it mainly caters to high net worth individuals, politicians and foreigners. And it is expected that rental yields will continue to be low in the short term. And we see this as a temporary slump in rental demand, and having an exodus of expats, we undoubtedly see bounce back in the short to medium term. Then coming to commercial real estate market, the office space. So most of the grade A offices locate in the prime areas in Colombo. Vacancy rate for grade A office spaces were on the rise and rents remained unchanged. However, we witnessed a 10% reduction in grade B and C rents. So there's a trend we saw that tenants leaving grade A office spaces and going into smaller spaces soon after the first lockdown in March 2020. The main change is that most industries identified work from home is possible. So work from home was not a new terminology. However, the pandemic made this go on a fast track and it affected occupancy levels and rental rates of the commercial real estate. Coming to the retail market, the retail market faced substantial shifts and amount of retail sales dropped to a new low. Tenants from prime retail malls provided discounted rent rates as lower footfall negatively impact their sales yield during 2020. And on average, retail rents in malls have been reduced by 70 to 75% in 2020. So the industry suffered mainly because of tourism being hit. And we believe the pressure on yields is going to be constant in the current environment in the short term. And so this is a occupancy fluctuation over the year 2020. So we could see One Golf Face has upped its occupancy compared to 2019. That's because the mall was newly opened in the Q4 of 2019, and some of those shops weren't moved in yet by the time we conducted the survey. Coming to the Colombo bare land market. So land values in central Colombo remain unchanged despite the sentiments that was caused by the pandemic. And consequently, bare lands have been a buyer's market for the past few years, and is a strong indication that it will continue to remain strong considering its long-term investment opportunities. So to get the full report of our annual report, please be in touch with RIU. So that's all from my end. Over to you, William.
Thank you, Anil. It seems that you have done a hell of a lot of research into all aspects of the economy and finance to get all this information. And thank you for giving us all this information on real estate in Sri Lanka. Right, before we get on to the next stage, let me again remind all of you to complete that questionnaire. It's worth $300 in subscription. So please complete that questionnaire and send it to the RIU. Now we move on to the panel discussion, and I'd like to hand you over to Roshan Madawela, who is the CEO and founding director of the RIU. Roshan will introduce our distinguished panel and put forward all the questions that have been raised by you. So Roshan, now it's over to you.
Hi everyone, thank you William, thank you for that. So today we're extremely honored to have a fabulously knowledgeable expert panel who are professionals and market leaders in their own areas. So we're very lucky that they're sharing some insights with all of us today. Starting with Minoli Wickramasinghe, she's a director of Capital Trust Holdings and also heads the Capital Trust Transactions team. They do the pioneering work in Colombo. Ranjith is the managing director of Sanken, if not the largest, one of the largest and most respected construction firms in Sri Lanka. Sanjay Wijemanne is a banking professional, a leader in his industry, having served with HSBC and Standard Chartered. He's currently head of retail banking at HMB. Presantha Jayamaha is the president of the American Chamber of Commerce Sri Lanka. And he's also the managing director of Best Western Colombo Hotels. And we are also fortunate to have joining us from Singapore, Mr. Adnan Swaminathan, who's the director of Envatis Digital and Millenities in Singapore. And he's an expert on digital living. So it's a highly professional and expert panel indeed. Let me start this off. Based on a lot of the questions that many of the people who've registered have already asked us, we've kind of highlighted the most important questions. So let me kick off with this question to Minoli. So our data indicates that there has been a resilience in the market, especially for residential properties. So from your point of view, is it purely a buyer's market? Or have the sellers and the developers also maintained their value? Over to you. Minoli, you have to unmute yourself, sorry. That's it.
Thank you, Roshan. Just to give you an overbrief of from 2019 to now, what we have gone through. So 2019 to 20 has been a very tough year for Sri Lanka, as everyone may have known, as the interest rates were double digit and around 18%, right? Coupled with we had a lot of economic instability to inconsistent economic policies. So we were riddled with lots of problems. We also had other calamities that came, like the Easter attacks in 2019, which brought in a fear psychosis into the market. And also in 2020, in the beginning, we had COVID, which actually put brakes to the real estate market. I think all over the world, this was so. Even in the UK, the real estate market came to a standstill. However, in Sri Lanka, 2020, even after, having COVID, we saw a big interest because we had a change of government and there was investor sentiment was going up. The government acted swiftly to bring in acted swiftly to bring down interest rates to all-time lows, which was a much needed move in the entail to increase economic growth. This brought in investor sentiment back into the market. They also brought in investor-friendly policies, which was much needed, such as the tax reforms, right? And we also see now there's a huge interest and a diversion from fixed deposits to real assets, as well as to the stock market, due to this low interest rates, all-time low interest rates, which actually is absolutely needed in a growing, to increase this economic growth, which we had a contraction. Actually, we had a negative growth in 2020, right? And due to the hardships of the last 4 years, we also saw many developers going bankrupt, and also we see the construction per se reduced drastically, as this will take some time actually to pick up for various reasons. Because of now with COVID, there's labor shortage, there's a restriction in importation. So to put all that things together, there will always be, there'll be some time that it will take to for the construction industry to pick up.
Thank you, Minoli. That
yes.
was very insightful. Can I throw the same question over to Sanjay? How has the real estate market fared, and when the government finally, currently we had historically low interest rates. I don't think Sri Lanka has had interest rates anything like this for many, many decades. How have you found that to have a spur to market activity from the point of view of your customers? Sanjay, you need to unmute. Yeah.
Thanks, Roshan. Yeah, I think Minoli touched on the interest rate scenario now, and I think that is correct in terms of the last 6 to 8 months, the rates have dropped drastically, and we've seen rates now in the range of 7 to 9.5, so single-digit rates for home mortgages, which we haven't seen for a long period. And I think this was also boosted further by a central bank special scheme, which is given at 7% now, especially for salaried employees, to make use of this opportunity and to actually have long-term funding to build their houses. So I feel this has created a huge momentum in terms of activity. There's lots of inquiries even from a banking side, with a lot of our customers now looking at the switch to property and apartments in particular. And also at the same time, because the fixed deposit rates are so low, 4.5 to 5%, it also is clearly a factor that people will look into, because the property market actually has been giving solid returns over a few years now, so and has stuck through without having a downturn. So with that type of confidence in the real estate market and the rates being low and to be in that range for the foreseeable future, I think this will add a huge uptick in terms of property buyers and the mortgage market for Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Sanjay. Brilliant. Can I ask you, do you think the current interest rates regime will be sustained in the short to medium term?
Yes, I think very clearly, the government's focus is to keep it at these levels because they want to encourage not just in a short-term trend, but realistically having a lot of low to middle income earners being able to own their homes. So they have also have a couple of programs that they are launching to really develop the home ownership in Sri Lanka and looking at very low income earner housing schemes for them to go into. So I feel definitely there will be schemes that will remain in the longer term also to allow these type of interest rates. And if you look at the economy itself, with the import restrictions, etc., there isn't a lot of threat in terms of this moving any other direction in, say, the next 12 to 24 months.
Thanks for that. So I've read many years ago that Sri Lankans love to spend, and hence the government has always tended to have very high interest rates. I guess Sri Lankans will be spending even more now, something to look forward to. So unfortunately, fortunately we've had low interest rate, but unfortunately FDI has also been pretty low in the last year or two. Like 5-10 years ago, every month we would hear of a new fresh project coming into Sri Lanka from a foreign investor from all parts of the world. But the last couple of years, we've kind of seen that dry up. For example, even Bangladesh has attracted a lot more FDI into its real estate market than Sri Lanka, which some years ago was the darling of the international investors in real estate. Can I ask Ranjith, where can we expect a U-turn, and when and where can we expect the investment to return to Sri Lanka? You need to unmute, Ranjith. Ranjith, you need to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Today, the webinar is on the real timely topic of what is required for Sri Lanka. Thank you very much for RIU for that. As Minoli said, our last 3 years, 2018, 19, 20, all these 3 years we had peculiar issues special to Sri Lanka. 2018, we had this parliament uncertainty going up and down. And 2019, it was as Easter bomb situation. And 2020, it was this COVID situation. This had some negative effects for the real estate development and the market. And but that itself has now made some upcoming situation for the real estate in the Sri Lanka in all areas, because this situation made directly or indirectly to put the main factors of the construction industry cost to reduce, because the government understood this situation and timely they identified the issues and addressed the issues. And even at this moment, the very important issues are being addressed in order to bring in investors and also to reduce the construction cost and also to encourage the construction people coming into the industry. For example, this tax, how they have handled the tax system without making up and down. They have only reduced the VAT drastically. Of course, there are so many comments, I mean, negative comments, positive comments on the government decision. I'm not speaking for the government, but as far as the real estate industry and the developers are concerned, our end product value went down by about 10%. That is main important thing. Second thing is the low interest rate. When we borrow money, or if you take it 99 or 100% of the people who are in the construction industry, maybe the other industries as well, that we do our business with borrowed money. So we have borrowed with 20, 21%, 18, 19%, and those days, I am talking about 10, 15 years back, thinking of single digits borrowing rate was like a dream. Today it has even to achieve 9%, but today it's 7% or 8%, or sometimes it's much less depending on the organization, so that the environment has created a lot of things for the real estate development to take place and to pick up. And I can feel it, especially being a contractor, that it's picking up. But at the moment, we have an issue with skilled people, because the countries around us, like Maldives, borrowed people from outside, Singapore borrowed people from outside, like that. But for Sri Lanka, we have our own people, but for the development, we'll have to borrow. And at the moment, we are getting down from India and few people from Bangladesh also for our development. So I think about 5-6 years back, this real estate development, we got down about 70-60% material, important material we used, right? That made our construction cost, end product cost much high. But because of, it's not very comfortable, but because of the government restrictions, now we are compelled to use a lot of local material and to put the real estate, the end product cost down. So with this, I think there will be many people in time to come invest in Sri Lankan property market, and then that itself will make for them to invest in the other business ventures in Sri Lanka, and the government is considering all this BOI concession and sustainability. So I like to address the other issues in this industry and others after the other members' comments.
So if I can press you to name me 3 countries where you think the real estate FDI will come from, and when do you think it will come? So the top 3.
Can you repeat the question again?
Could you name like 3 countries where we can expect some foreign direct investment into the real estate market? I'll come back to Minoli later. So for now, putting Ranjith on the spot. Could you be able to name perhaps the top 3 future destinations?
No, because our thing is the 3 countries is mainly the European countries, and the 5 countries is not the countries around us coming to real estate market, because the value of Sri Lanka by geographical value and by other means, what is happening in the real estate is very much valued. I know with our properties being how the trend of our properties being sold, it's the European and Far East countries are very much interested getting involved with the Sri Lankan market.
All right, thank you, Ranjith. I'm going to ask the same question from Presantha, who would you be able to perhaps shed some light from a Western country FDI perspective, how the West perceives Sri Lanka at the moment as a potential investment destination in general, and perhaps also touch on specifically for real estate as well?
Sure. Thank you, Roshan. There's been some very interesting answers already given, and Ranjith has really got into it. So I'll just share a few thoughts on our opinion. So I think the FDI coming in from a developer perspective versus a buyer, if we differentiate those, the exchange rate will play a big part in that. So the Sri Lankan currency is going to be under pressure in the next 2 years. That's a fact. We are all forecasting it. Every bank is putting different models out there. So from a developer perspective, I think the number one point will be getting your money out. Once you develop the project, what will be the exchange rate hit? So can you get your currency out? So those questions I don't think can be answered in the next 1 year. That's my view. But on the alternate front, as Mr. Ranjith Gunatilleke said, that if the local developers continue with the projects and the development, I think the currency depreciation will actually make us more attractive for buyers that are coming into individual apartments, the diaspora, the individual buyers. So identifying, splitting those two markets, I think we can see a difference there. So are we going to have large global developers walking into Sri Lanka in the next year? It'll be difficult. Unless we have a currency hedge and we can protect, some level of repatriation of funds. Your question regarding a general non-real estate view on Sri Lanka on the FDI side. So through AmCham, we've been doing quite a bit of work in the last year. We have a project called Trade Shifts. Roshan, I gave you an update on that, which is actually understanding the trade shifts that are taken part in Asia post-COVID. When the global factories shut down, a lot of countries had to relook at their supply chain. Can we depend on one country to supply the world's materials? There's an estimate of $150 billion worth of exports that are going to move out and move across ASEAN and SAARC. So with those shifts taking place, hard currency will move. So you're talking export currency moving into certain countries. India has seen a lot of it. Vietnam, Bangladesh is now catching it. Japan is actually given a $4 billion fund for any company that wants to relocate into Bangladesh. So there is some low-hanging fruit for Sri Lanka in the next 24 months. If we can secure some of that business, a few percentage of $150 billion can make a big difference. So I think that's one of our low-hanging fruit. If we can show the world that, listen, Sri Lanka can be a good contingency for, without having a single source country, we can manufacture some of this product so that you have 2 or 3 bases of a supply chain. I think that is where we can really play, and part of that, whole of right now SAARC is going and ASEAN is running behind this business. What we need to really offer is not just saying we have a great location and logistics, but we also have access to 2 billion people. We have FTAs, we have access, we have 45 minutes flight to over 2 billion people. And we have the greatest environment for you to come and set up your business. We have the lovely real estate. We give you good education. We can give you the whole, the whole holistic experience. So I think that's the positioning Sri Lanka will have to take. And there are wins along the way, but we have to be smart on what sort of money we attract. Thank you, Roshan.
Thanks, Presantha. That's an excellent pitch for Sri Lanka. I hope the BOI is listening. Who do you think will be our main competitors in that trade shifts? Very interesting concept.
So I'll tell you who's getting the biggest part of the pie. India seems to be way ahead. They have scored on Google. They've got Microsoft. They've got most of the. They've got the most biggest phone manufacturers moving in there, and you're talking multi-billion-dollar contracts. So the story is, if you get a few breadcrumbs from the big table, you're okay with it. So I think if Sri Lanka can be the support infrastructure, be the Hong Kong of this part of the world, I think we have a quick win. There are certain things India can't do because they need such scale. Sri Lanka can get into niche product manufacturing that we can maybe supply certain part of that supply chain and use our FTA to get into India. We've definitely got a big win.
Brilliant, thank you. Before I come to Anand, I'm just gonna, Minoli put a hand up. Minoli, 1 minute, you wanted to add something about sources of FTA. You need to unmute. Yeah.
Roshan, I keep on emphasizing the one belt, one route initiative because we are a very important part for China. So I think Chinese investments will come here, we like it or not, right? So because they find our the location very strategic. So that is the very reason that 2018, with all the hardships, our if you know, our prices actually went up and did not go down. So prices was resilient, it did not go down as people expected. So like that, now 2021, although we have COVID and all that, we see the property sector, I actually see that there's lots of transaction and there's lots of tangible, interest that is coming in, and very big interest. So with that, and I have lived in Hong Kong, and I know the resources that Sri Lanka has. We have multiple resources which even Hong Kong does not have. So and the location where we are is a golden location. So strategically placed, we will actually, I think our real estate will never go wrong. That is what I actually tell you.
True, thank you. Actually, it's kind of a statistical fact that island economies never really experience a downward trend in property, land prices in particular, because of the scarcity. So yeah, that's good to know.
So and also Roshan, with the port city, coming in, we become a very important real estate element. So that is another thing that will attract.
Actually, there are a lot of questions coming in on that. We'll get back to that. So I'm going to leap to the future and reach out to Adnan, who I'm going to ask. There are many questions about the shape of things to come. So with the future FDA, we'll get a new generation of developers coming in, hopefully not too far in the future. So what can we expect in terms of technology? We're in an age of accelerated technology development, the data age. You're an expert in this. What impact do you think this will have from, everything from the fact that solar panels will be so cheap that they would obviously take over, building materials might change, you might have robots, concierge, so many things. So how do you think this will impact the next generation of real estate? Over to you, Anil.
Hi, greetings from Singapore. Thanks, Roshan. That's a very interesting question when you're talking about future from an interconnected space between the various hardware, options like what you talked about, solar panels and the robots and the concierge services and all that integrated with the solutions that I, as a user living in a 3-bedroom apartment or villa or how does they all impact my experience in the digital space? That's a crucial difference that the technology is going to drive in the future. What's known to all of us, and we have all experienced that, is the change in technology is very rapid. So what's last year is dead this year, and what we are holding in our hand is already dead next year. But then the digital living experience that one expects should not change with the change in the various devices that are taking place in the marketplace. So when it comes to the building and the real estate industries, it's a gradual evolving process where as the market, as the country matures, as the country starts looking at a higher standard of living, their expectation about how to simplify their life through digital solutions is a normal expectation that comes across. And one or two points that caught my attention, of course, by the various panelists who made comments. One was Mr. Ranjith's comment that the FDI is going to flow in from Far East and European countries. Now, this will again bring a sense of some kind of a change in the mindset of both the direct players who are involved in the industry and the beneficiaries of this industry as well, which are basically the real estate buyers. How this whole thing falls from a future perspective? Well, it's simple. If I have to manage my life from the time I wake up till the time I hit the bed in the night with a simple, non-complex mobile solution, that's what I would go for. Now, where the complexities lies today is because of too many fragmented solutions and everybody talks about smart solutions, it kind of, is a misnomer, because smart is not just turning on or turning off your air conditioning or light from your mobile device. Now that's basic. But digital living is where it does not matter what part of your process in your daily life is, whether you are at home managing your lifestyle at home in the morning as soon as you wake up, and along the way to the office, how you manage your business functions, your career functions, or how you're attending to the so-called your career life, and then evening when you're back in the community space, when your social life, how you're able to simplify the whole digital living using a simple mobile solution or a simple digital solution. That's called digital living. And that's happening in many countries in the world. We are seeing that across developed societies, and far more I'm seeing it in developing economies. China is way ahead. I see the way they use their digital mobile solutions for something that is very basic, is amazing. I see India catching up very fast. Sometimes some advanced economies like Singapore could be a little behind. It seems that they are ahead of the technology curve when it comes to the quality or to the lifestyle. But when it comes to the digital adoption, I find that Singapore is a little behind compared to China or India in many aspects, be it in banking, be it in utilization of technology in your apartments, utilization of technology in your community centers, in your social life. So emerging economies always provide far more adaptable platform, and that's what I see in a fast-growing industry like Sri Lanka, with so much amount of real estate resilience. And as the theme is rightly talking about resurgence, resurgence is not about just buying an apartment or a commercial build unit. Resurgence is where I'm able to integrate a lot of technology into it to make my particular investment far more convenient and far more sociable. That's digital living. And the solutions that are available in the market are plenty to actually help users, whether it's grandparents to the grandchildren in the house, to adapt technology and make their life comfortable.
Thank you, Adnan. Can I ask you, how long will it be before buildings are so smart that, for example, they'll calculate the occupancy of an apartment block and regulate the amount of hot water that's needed or central air conditioning? Or how long before, like the fridge will order your milk for you without having to do it yourself?
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting, diverse aspects you talked about, Roshan. That's good analogy when you're talking about how the building is smart enough to regulate your heated water versus how your fridge is smart enough to understand what you need on from consumption, from running your life.
Are we there now?
Not the technology is there, the solutions are there. What's holding up is the financial considerations to make it work in a residential space. So in a commercial building, the first question that you talked about, regulating the heating or the ventilating systems depending on the occupancy, that's already rolled out across commercial buildings, many parts of the world. But bringing the technology into a residential segment, that's something, the technology is there, but I think the budget could be a constraint for developers to take that cost upfront. And if it's not built, if the infrastructure is not built into the architecture upfront, it becomes difficult for the occupant to take benefit of that solution. Then it comes back to, sorry, you're saying something?
No, carry on. Sorry.
So then it comes back to, okay, I'm not able to regulate the water conditions, on automated basis. So obviously my energy bills are high. That's something I cannot do much about it as an occupant or owner of the apartment. But what I could do is, buy a, IoT fridge, an Internet of Things fridge, which tells me what I need, what's running short inside. Now that's there, but I don't see many people using that because it's fancy to have that fridge. But people using that is very, very, very small portion of it. It's only the so-called digital addicts, so-called technology addicts who try out the solution. But if you're talking about mass adoption, it's still not there. Not because the technology is not there on that side. It's just that as a user, I don't want to be bothered about the fridge telling me what I need to do.
Right, okay. I'm just going to throw that at Ranjith. If you can answer in 1 minute, we're running out of time as well. Can we expect the next generation of developments in Sri Lanka to have some form of leap in technology, and what would be the shape of that? Ranjith, you need to unmute. Yeah.
No, it's like this. Today, I can't say today, after 21st, when I say today, when you come and land in Sri Lanka, whether it's Gunatilleke or whether you land in down south Mattala, how soon you can get into Colombo? If it is Gunatilleke, you come down within next, say, 15 to 20 minutes. And if it is Mattala, you come down to Colombo in 20 minutes. So the country has, by the development, country has made smaller, right? And this infrastructure development, I'm just taking only one example. And very soon, we are going to have these expressways to our gem district, Ratnapura, and also we are going to have it into Kandy. So country becomes very small. The smaller the country, and we will have all the facilities in this tiny country, which no one can give that product to any investor in the future in real estate development. Those who really want to have a balance, very clean living. Because we have experienced with this COVID-19 situation, how uncomfortable when you are in a apartment with digital living, how uncomfortable, because you can't get out. You can't get out from your apartment. You can't get out from your country. You're like in an open prison by a virtue of a disease or the virus, which you can't fight overnight and take it out. But the people in the countryside, where they are not much affected on that way. So today I can see in Sri Lanka, outside the country, I mean outside the urban areas, the development and the demand is very much high, because especially because of the post-COVID situation. Then when you come to the urban side, what the development now taking place, especially the middle income group, right? By private sector and also by the government, they have addressed all the youth and the government sector people at an affordable price for them to start the life in a convenient way. That is the urban development middle income group. So these will definitely give us Sri Lanka in the future in the real estate different look or different picture landscaping, which anyone from outside Sri Lanka, especially the diaspora, to come to Sri Lanka and invest in these areas, which make very high level of redevelopment in time to come.
Thanks, Ranjith. Once again, we're running out of time, but there are a lot of questions coming through from members of the audience. Before we get to that, just wanted to ask again, in terms of Sri Lanka's biggest perceived or forecasted source of FDI in real estate will be the port city. I think they've already secured Browns as an investor. I think some very famous investors from London have recently visited the port city, I think last week. So from your point of view, I know there was some political issues there. Could you shed some light on that very quickly, and just maybe let us know if that will have, what kind of impact we can expect from that? Yeah.
Thank you, Roshan. I believe you're referring to the US sanctioning of China Communications Construction Company, which is the parent company for China Harbor. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So there has been a US sanctioning of that company for obviously the business itself. That was a public announcement maybe the last 3 months ago. That was part of the Trump administration, from where I begin to understand that will continue. It may affect the financial dealings of the company itself. I cannot comment whether it will affect the financial dealings within the port city, because there are different entities. I think it's early to make a assumption on how that will affect, but definitely there will be some complexities within dollar transactions within CCC and US, and especially if there are US transactions that have to be regulated or approved by the state government. Yeah, so I mean, there's a nice analogy that says that when elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. So we may feel a bit of that, but hopefully, in the next few years, these things should get ironed out.
Do you think Joe Biden's presidency will swing it in either direction?
Personal opinion, outside the chamber, and this second were anyway in play. Trump was actually acting on some decisions that were taken maybe in the last term of Obama's administration. So what I'm believed to understand is that even Biden will continue with what they consider to be a China policy that has been implemented in the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah. So there is going to be a geopolitical tensions, and I expect that to be polarizing some parts of this Asia, India, Japan playing one side, and I mean, we can see what's happening. So
it should be very interesting times to see that play out. Yeah,
nicely put.
From Sri Lanka's perspective. So tomorrow we are opening the airport. Sorry, day after tomorrow, as Dr. Priyanka suggested. I don't have any inside information. It was a fluke. So there's a huge pent-up demand, as we all know. We're fortunate to have Dr. Shiva, based in London, who is happy to share his view on what the diaspora's impact will be. Dr. Shiva is the CEO of iBank and a business leader in London with very strong ties with Sri Lanka, always helping with various projects. So can I, Dr. Shiva, can you address the issue of the diaspora returning in, say, 2 minutes? Over to you.
Thank you, Roshan. Thank you for inviting me. And it's very interesting discussion, and very nice to see the panel. See, I really, like you said, that Nathaniel Rothschild came to Sri Lanka, Port City. One of the very high figure from Rothschild family came to Sri Lanka for Port City. And I really invite all the other Sri Lankans diaspora all over the world to promote within their country, to bring these kind of prominent figures to Sri Lanka. And I think this is the need of the hour. All the Sri Lankans should participate and develop our country to a better way. And also one more thing that I'm really want to know is, like, yes, Port City and various other projects are happening in Sri Lanka. How is the government or the other people who are involved in the ground intention to bring foreign direct investment, and also funneling the individual investments to Sri Lanka? And at the same time, like, how do we be kind of, away from all these political, the problems, especially, with the China, US, it's really a sad part. And also, I want to know whether we have something called Colombo Plan, which we have had it in 1950, where 27 countries are the members of the Colombo Plan, including Australia, Japan, America, US, New Zealand. So this is another area that we can use this non-aligned movement in a very highly, making it more sound way, so that, like, we are not going to get into like problems like CCCC, like sanctioning by America. And also, I just want to understand like how the 2021, it's all really good. And I'm hoping that we'll have a very good year for this year. And how do you think, Roshan, like, the new apartments and the take-ups would be by the individuals in this year?
Thank you, Dr. Shiva. Yeah, very enlightening, and we look forward to you returning to Sri Lanka. So actually, the answer to your question, to answer that, I will refer to a question from Uday. He says, as a consultant, he has difficulty to obtain funding from banks. And he has also said that many of the diaspora have difficulty getting funding from local banks. And we've noticed this from a long time ago, that when we promote Sri Lankan properties overseas, especially to the diaspora, there are a much larger number of people are willing to invest if they have the same access to bank financing as if someone living in Colombo, for example. So I'm going to put that to Sanjay. What is your experience with the diaspora in terms of banking, and what are the barriers, and how can we overcome it? So like, we're going to kind of keep this to like 2-3 minutes each while I go through the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially, I think it's a valid sort of question, and also some concerns. But I think with time, the banks have also evolved in terms of understanding better the income sources and other sort of data that we can analyze from this end, so that we can actually make better credit decisions of the diaspora living overseas. So I would think that maybe in the past, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, this was a situation. But right now, with a lot of property developers doing a lot of overseas roadshows, the banks joining hands and going with them, this has sort of taken a turn to the positive angle, and banks are very much in favor of looking at options or crediting or giving credit lines to diaspora for their investments. I think one of the areas that we've been finding a bit difficult is to ascertain proper sort of income or revenue lines that they generate either doing their business there or with the sort of the salaries and the employment structures. So with those sort of certifications or financial documentation that they can provide, certainly is something that all banks will look forward to. And I can assure you that HNB is very much positive in terms of supporting the diaspora in investing back in Sri Lanka. It's also for us, it's definitely a segment that we want to develop, nurture, and support. So for any sort of areas of concern, we are more than happy to address and to support them in their venture in terms of investing here.
Can I ask you a specific question? If somebody has a property in Sri Lanka but has a foreign passport, can they leverage that property to borrow from a local bank? Would that be possible? Yes, no, or maybe?
So essentially, right now, the only sort of the borrowing allowed under the regulation is either having a valid Sri Lankan passport or being a dual citizen. Now, as long as one of those two criteria are met, then we can go ahead and lend. Unfortunately, still we haven't opened up, or at least the regulation hasn't been formed yet, to allow foreigners to borrow in Sri Lanka and invest here. That is something that we look forward to, or at least the banks are happy to support. And many years, every time the sort of the budget comes along, this proposal is always put forward. But so far, we haven't seen that coming through. But hopefully in the future, that will be cleared, so that a lot of the foreigners who want to invest to buy a holiday home, to buy a nice beachfront apartment, will have access to funding in Sri Lanka, leaving that particular property as a mortgage. And you can have sort of a fairly reasonable loan to value ratio, so that you also encourage money coming into the country, but also then allow them to borrow, because that is the only way to grow this market and really encourage people to invest here.
Thanks, Sanjay. There are lots of questions on that. We will forward them to you, and perhaps you can answer members of the audience through more specific questions. Here's one from Anuk Samarakodi. Can you shed some light on REITs in Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka has gazetted recently, as you know, REITs. Anyone on the panel like to take this? A 2-minute answer on REITs? Minoli, perhaps? Anyone? Yeah.
Roshan, the REITs, the regulations are in place and they have gazetted it, but it's still long way for implementation. So we'll have to wait for that to come in. But they are making the rule book and all those stuff so that we can have that as an instrument. I think that will be a very good thing for the real estate in Sri Lanka.
So as we understand it, it will be listed under the Colombo Stock Exchange.
That's right.
Same rules, right? Which is very strict.
Yeah. So actually, our company is also it's actually one of the largest stockbroking companies and the largest in terms of the turnover and brokerage turnover. So so as we know, they are doing this, but it will take some time for the actual REITs to come into the market. But they're doing the regulations.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else to shed some light on REITs? Okay, next one from Sean Senarat says, with the current position in the market, when can we expect the housing and the land market to spike again? Actually, before I ask the local experts, I'm going to throw that at Anil. Very curious to know where Singapore is at in terms of recovering from COVID in general and maybe specifically to real estate. 2 minutes, Anil, please. You need to unmute.
Yeah, I think Singapore has definitely done a better job than many other countries in terms of managing COVID. That's because of very obvious reasons. The country is always well managed, and more importantly, the people are also more listening to what the government has to say. So, which I think is very crucial. Plus, in terms of technology, what they have adapted very early days itself was quite good. They started contact tracing. They started keeping track of everyone who was having a coffee or having spent some time in the office or in the restaurant with anybody else who had symptoms of fever, and anybody who was traced positive, immediately the volunteers, the healthcare authorities tracked at least 150 of each contact who I could have come across directly or indirectly if I'm infected. And they started isolating and they started putting some kind of enforce some rules. But as the situation started improving, they started implementing two technology. One is safe entry. So even today, if I have to enter my office, I have to scan a QR code from an app, which is actually a government regulated app, and which will give data back to the government to tell which location I've been and how long I stayed, and anybody else in that location, if they are down with any symptoms, the government then knows immediately that I have been involved or exposed, and then they isolate me.
From an economic point of view, do you know where Singapore's at in terms of the recovery to normal economic activity?
Yeah, so from exact percentage wise, I don't have, but from headline news or general knowledge news, what I know is that the economic recovery in the Q4, which is October, November, December of 2020 was better than the earlier 3 quarters. I think there was a 1% or a small percentage growth, and I may be wrong, but don't hold me, I'm not an expert on this area. And from the forecast, I'm told that the next 2 quarters, they're seeing some positive outlooks.
Excellent, excellent. So, Sri Lanka looks up to Singapore at the moment, as I think Singapore used to look up to Singapore some years back. So that's a good sign. So Sean Senarat, Dimutu Udukampola, and Roshan Madawela, a number of people asking which real estate segment is going to recover first. Who would like to shed some light into that? Anyone? Minoli? Yeah.
Actually, we have actually seen a increase in the residential real estate because one is the low interest rates have boosted this segment because what happens is low interest rates and the exchange rate going up makes the value of money is not there unless you put it in a real asset. So that people have realized and they're putting it in real estate, which is a very tangible real asset, which will appreciate, and in a country like ours, it won't fail. So that is one thing that is gone up. Commercial real estate, we have had a hit for the reason that there's this concept of home working. Concept have taken well in Sri Lanka. So that has hit the commercial real estate. So it will be the residential real estate that will go forward.
That residential apartments?
Apartments, mainly apartments and lands as well.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Roshan, can I add?
Sure, yes.
Yes. No, I agree with Minoli. It's because around 4 years back or 3 years back, we had a residential real estate. We had a oversupply in Colombo, especially in Colombo. But now I feel, being in the industry, with this less interest rate and the picking up, the situation is undersupply. So I think also with the sales taking place of the present apartments, there will be a undersupply situation and good for anyone, any interest parties investing in the real estate at this moment.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Roshan, to add to that. Roshan, to add to that, I agree with Ranjith. What we had, a lot of people thought we had a bubble in the residential real estate. We actually didn't have. We are only 1% of apartments in Sri Lanka compared to other countries like Malaysia, right? And the other thing is that a lot of the developers, the smaller developers, which were individuals, did not sustain. Like they
that for us, please.
Sure, Roshan. Give you my opinion on it. Distressed sales. I won't use the word distress, but there has been some interesting value transactions that have happened even on the market. I think LOLC picked up Serendib at a really interesting price, and that would have happened if it wasn't for COVID. We've also seen some smaller hoteliers who I think closed down over the post Easter and having cash flows that have been obviously under pressure, and then going to COVID without having a good balance sheet. Those are the hotels that are right now on the market. There is not been a real properties on the market. I think the sales are going to start once the moratorium gets lifted in March. I believe March or August. I think then that's when the NPLs, and there's going to be a bit of pressure on the sell side. So my guess is August onwards, we're going to see some distressed sales and consolidation. The industry, they need to fragment it, too many small operators. It's the math doesn't add up. So there should be consolidation anyway. So that should be the next.
Thanks, Presantha. Sanjay, anything to add on that from your perspective?
Yeah, I think there have been a little bit of profit taking also, especially on the residential properties and the apartment sector, because some of the people who had gone in very early and invested, were trying to sell out and make a bit of a gain, because obviously they've been waiting for a longer period than some of the others. So I wouldn't say distress selling, but certainly a bit of profit taking, and that also allowed others to get in at fairly reasonable prices. So overall, I still feel the appetite for buying is greater, with the factors that are there in terms of interest rate, and also probably the price levels that are now available in some of the, especially the residential properties and the apartment sector. So yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for that. There have been a number of questions about where people should invest, where is the best location. Is Kandy the next location in terms of real estate investment? Just like Gaul benefited hugely from the highway, we can expect the Kandy Expressway to be completed maybe in the next couple of years. Can I put that to Ranjith? What are the big infrastructure projects that will affect specific geographic locations in Sri Lanka, please? You need to unmute, yeah.
Sorry. No, there is no any specific geographic location I can straight away tell. But if you see, very soon, a lot of things will depend on this COVID, other than the real estate development in residential. Once the COVID situation is over, with the hospitality sector take over, I mean, comes out, definitely all over the country, total the coastal belt and also Alla Norelia, these developments will take place in a very short time, and the construction industry material will be on supply demand, so that those materials will be limited in Sri Lanka, so that there will be a high price on the materials. I expect that, so that even for the labor, we may have imported labor, but it is controlled, but the material prices will contribute a lot of things to the cost of the construction industry. So that
can the highway have an impact on land market in Kandy? Mr. Melli from Kandy would like to know.
No, with the Kandy, especially the expressway getting cleared, and my personal experience, with the Kandy people, right? The local people interested in apartment projects, Kandy has proved not much. They like horizontal development rather than the vertical development. And it is a little, we have done some development in Jaffna. Jaffna, just for your information, the cost of lower floors is much higher than the upper floors. In Colombo, it's the vice versa. It's Colombo, upper floors are higher than the lower floors. And Kandy, people like horizontal development and get into independent houses rather than apartment houses. So this
what
is
about gated community living or resort apartments?
Yes, they definitely they might go for gated. They prefer the gated community. Kandy will have a high demand. This is what I have experienced.
Thanks. Roshan Madawela would like to know if the government should and will take steps to regulate property developers, because several developers have been made insolvent and buyers have lost out. As everyone here knows, that affects everybody in the market, because I think Sri Lanka is very fortunate. The reputation is still very good, but if there's a series of insolvencies and if more than a handful of people are affected, and that's going to really affect the perception of real estate as an asset class, especially from the diaspora perspective. Would anyone like to tackle that question? What can policymakers do to protect buyers from developer insolvency? Ranjith, yeah.
Yeah. What I want to say at this moment, especially for the investors, I think even the local investors or the foreign investors who are trying to make things jointly, they think about bringing in or investing about 20% and borrowing about another 30% and expect sales to take place while doing the construction is no longer in existence. This was there about 10 years back. So you have certain very small percentage and you go on with the pre-sales. For two reasons it has failed, because people thinking a better product tomorrow. Second thing is, some developers who has undertaken on this assumption has failed in continuing financing the projects. So I strongly believe any investor coming to Sri Lanka in the future must come with at least 40% of the total project, so that the bank will give at least 30%, and then even with few sales, pre-sales, project will be completed and it will be a success. That is one thing.
Can that be regulated, Ranjith?
Yes.
Is that something?
No. Still it's not regulated. But
okay.
I know very well in the other countries, you can't, without showing your at least 80% or 75% of your own, resources, you can't start a project. And at least Sri Lanka, we try to get these things through a bank, but some individuals work out with the bank saying that the money should be put into the banks and the banks will pay the contractor or the developer. I think that mechanism is getting placed. That's very good. So it's a good for the customers. Then the second thing for the investors or the developers, one unfortunate thing is that when they try to invest, that there are certain rules and regulations are not properly managed, because in the Sri Lanka system, we have the central government and that line of duties and taxes and stamp fees to be paid. Then we have provincial council, various stamp duties and other things to be paid. Then we have the municipal councils to be paid. So when you do a development, in fact, this is now very seriously being considered by the government. Sometimes a lot of indirect expenses, the developer can't judge accurately, right? So this will become a very difficult situation for the developer or the investor. This is now being addressed by the government. So hope very soon, if they clear it, then there will be a lot of developers and some justice to the buyers.
Okay. Thanks, Ranjith. Actually, that's a good point to try to wind up on. If each of you was to have 1 minute to perhaps highlight one policy measure that the government can introduce to nurture the real estate industry. I think Atif Afan has also said, what can the government do to protect or nurture the leisure industry? So let's look at the entire the real estate space, that is residential, commercial, retail, and leisure. If the government was to try to revitalize or help sustain the growth that has been experienced, in a nutshell, what would the panel like to say in terms of policies? Brief as possible, please. Show of hands for anyone who wants to say anything. New policies? No? Okay, that's right. Sorry, Minoli first and okay, Ranjith, you go ahead. Yeah.
No, this by one sentence, I think from the time that the developer thinks to develop or invest, from the last products to be given out, if we can follow high high degree of discipline in all financial things, approvals, commitments, that will definitely make Sri Lanka real estate development to a better degree.
Thanks, Sanjay. Yes. Minoli, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's like they should give more tax reforms as they have given now. The present government has done. And because the real estate sector is a very important, it's very important for the economy, and also less bureaucratic ways of getting approvals, which is the terrible thing. You need to, it takes a long time for a person to get approvals in Sri Lanka.
Right. That's a developer perspective, yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. Just interested to know, Anand, from a non-Sri Lankan perspective and living in Singapore, have you been to Sri Lanka before? And what is your view of Sri Lanka? Would you invest in property here? Sri Lanka is, of course, very different from Singapore and offers a different experience. In a minute, would you like to answer that?
Sure. I have been to Sri Lanka multiple times pre-COVID. In fact, I used to be traveling twice, thrice a year on business trips there. We do have a local setup where we sell the digital solutions, and my visits always used to bring me to meet customers and partners. I love undoubtedly the charm that is there in Colombo and Sri Lanka as a tourist, as a visitor. It's just enchanting, and I always come back with sweet memories, even though I'm on a business trip. I must admit, in terms of the dynamism that I see in the real estate space as a general visitor, I used to observe. I keep traveling to the region to a lot, to Bangladesh as well, multiple times a year. And I think in the opening statement, you did make a comment about how Bangladesh has been more rapidly receiving FDIs better than Sri Lanka in the real estate, which is very visible. I could notice as a traveler to Bangladesh, even though it's not, with all due respect, as enchanting as Sri Lanka would be as a tourist, but I can see the buzz and the dynamism that is there in the construction and the real estates, the sheer growth that I can see, even though it's very chaotic. So from that perspective, yes, I think to some extent, I always felt good coming to Sri Lanka because it's not yet overly developed and there is some amount of the old charm in it. But yes, I would be willing to put money in it. I have already been in discussions with my local business partner even prior to this forum, and prior to COVID, we were actually looking at exploring some joint investments towards some kind of a resort or something that we have been exploring. It's been along with another Singaporean partner, along and with my local Sri Lankan business partner.
Can I give you a number to some of the people here?
Absolutely. And now that I'm connected with the experts, I'm sure I would be taking your feedback before I, make the decisions to move forward.
There are some amazing apartments developed by the people here. So when you come over next time, hopefully soon, you can do that.
Sure, yeah.
Yes. There are questions about land prices. Nihal Ranasinghe wants to know, is it advisable to dispose of private lands? I think we'll have to skip some of these questions. I think as people here have said, it's not advisable to give up anything undervalued unless you are really distressed, because the property market will only continue to face upward pressure in Sri Lanka. Yeah, maybe unfair to compare with in Bangladesh. I think Dhaka alone has a population almost the same as the entire Sri Lanka. And Dhaka, for example, where most of the investments going, has an urbanization of 500,000 every year. So it's a massive market, and it's completely different. I mean, I think the dynamics are different, but you're right. Sri Lanka is not the only girl on the beach, as you say, so it is a competitive environment. Brilliant. To summarize, as the panel of experts has said, I have learned a lot as well. From a position where we were perceived to have an oversupply, we're actually looking at an emerging scenario where we're going to have an undersupply. combined with the airports opening up and the pent-up demand of the diaspora, plus the currency impact, interest rates being very low and attractive, we are looking at continual improvements in absorption. So yeah, the word bubble is not something that would resonate with the local market. I don't think it ever did, but I don't think that mistake could ever be made ever again. It's also an exciting time because the new generation of projects in this rapidly changing data digitizing world where technology is having a larger and more powerful impact, we can probably see much of these aspects also coming in into future developments here in the way we do business. So thanks for that, adding the dimension to it. So yeah, the rental yield, I think, was the main concern because of the obviously lack of tourists and expats, etc. So without putting my neck on the line, we would expect that to bounce back. So in terms of this kind of a black swan event of 2020, it would be right to say that the market has been resilient, and we were worried if resurgence was too strong a word or was it being too optimistic. Perhaps not, after listening to you guys. Before I give it back to William, a gentle reminder for you guys listening to fill in the questionnaire and subscribe, get the free subscription to the Market Intelligence Service. Thank you very much, everyone on the panel. It's been amazing, really has. And yeah, over to you, William. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan. Before, can you assure all those people who have asked questions that you will respond to them by email?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So we will respond to all those questions that have been.
Sanjay as well. I have the people.
Yeah, okay. So thank you to Roshan. Thank you all the panelists for your excellent and knowledgeable responses to all the questions asked. Once again, it's been an insightful and thought-provoking session. A big thank you to all the panelists, presenters, and most importantly, all of you who tuned in to listen and contribute. I hope they addressed your issues today. It would be remiss of me if I didn't offer special thanks to Malinga, Neflan, Onila, Malin, and the entire RIU team who have worked tirelessly for the past few weeks to bring this webinar to you. So one final thing is that we should have a vote of thanks. And I now turn to Mr. Shirnath D'Souza on behalf of the International Chamber of Commerce. Shirnath is the treasurer of the International Chamber of Commerce in Sri Lanka and has over 25 years experience in banking and real estate. Shirnath, over to you.
Thank you, William. As the event partner, ICC Sri Lanka is very happy to be associated with today's webinar. And if I am to, in parting, if I am to say a few thoughts, leave a few thoughts with you, mainly to the individual investor, I think we haven't seen this kind of low rates for housing loans in the past 30 years. I think that is a great opportunity we have. And also we have certain institutions and buyers who are willing to be a bit flexible with their asking prices when it comes to sale. And also the banks are more than happy to look at everybody on a one-on-one basis and make decisions in terms of credit. So in this environment, I would like to thank everybody again for taking part, and also urge everybody to, if they are in the market to buy a piece of land or apartment, I would urge them to do it in the near future. Thank you.
So thank you, Shirnath. Thank you, everybody. It has been a certainly very enlightening session for all of us. We will do this again but your responses are needed to the questionnaire because that will help us determine when we can have the next session like this. So thanks once again, everybody, and bye for now. Bye-bye.
Be market intelligent with RIU.